An incredible British Grand Prix sees Lando Norris win his first ever British Grand Prix, Oscar Piastri second, Nico Hulkenberg third. Here are my 3 takeaways following this one. I got the notebook handy, so let's go through them. I want to start with the penalty that Oscar Piastri had gotten. So at the end of every Grand Prix, what normally happens is that we get sent a document from the FIA, and inside that document, it basically reads out what the driver was doing inside the cockpit within that moment and their reason for applying the penalty. So for Piastri, it's interesting to note a couple things. First of all, the amount of pressure that Piastri was braking with, 52.9 PSI. Now, if we go back to Canada, where Red Bull Racing protested that race because of when George Russell was behind the pace car and he broke and Max Verstappen sort of went by him, the amount of pressure in that moment that George Russell put on the brake pedal, 30 PSI. The second part to this is how much speed did Oscar Piastri shed when he was on hanger straight and slowing down quite quickly. So the stewards said it was braking erratically. 166 kilometers an hour. That's quite a bit. However, if you also factor in how cool it was here for the race, it was about 17 degrees, so quite cool. Rainy as well. So the tires are going to get colder, brake temps are going to drop. And so I can understand braking that aggressively so you can get the temperatures up when the lights go out on the safety car and you want to get back to racing. I was with Andrea Stella following the race, and he had a couple interesting things to say. For 50 PSI, he felt that was the pressure that you would normally brake at in these situations under a safety car when accelerating and then going back to the brake pedal as well. He also made an interesting point that they would have to take a better look if competitors had have played a bigger role in what had happened here today. So Max Verstappen sort of flying by Piastri and maybe accentuating the amount at which it looked like Piastri braked and slowed the car down. So that was one thing that Stella thought they would have to take a look at. But you go back to Canada again, same sort of thing, right? Verstappen's right there beside George Russell again when he slows down on the straightaway behind the safety car. So different scenarios, different situations. My thoughts on it are, I mean, should he have been penalized for it? I mean, yes. Was the penalty a little bit too harsh though? I think so. I mean, 5-second time penalty would have been enough. Maybe 10 was overstepping it, I felt. Nico Hulkenberg. So his first F1 debut, 2010. It's been 239 Formula One races. Finally scores his first Grand Prix podium. Heck of a job done by Hulkenberg. I was with Jonathan Wheatley post-race. So got to sit down, hear from him, ask him questions, that kind of thing. And for Wheatley, he felt with Nico's race in particular, there was a point where they switched from intermediate tires over to intermediate tires, where a lot of the teams went from the intermediate tires over to the slicks. And Wheatley felt that they timed that perfectly, and that's what helped catapult Hulkenberg up the grid, essentially. And Nico just running a good race from there, making sure that he wasn't degging the tire too much. However, Sauber has put a lot of performance into this car, so I do see it actually benefiting them when it comes to the tires and having the performance and making sure that the tire isn't degrading too much, because that's one of the things that these teams are struggling with, is when they bring these upgrades, the tire deg just gets way too high. But for Sauber, they're really happy with where that is in terms of their tire degradation with the performance on the car. So Hulkenberg said that he had better tire degradation than Lance did. Lance actually was suffering from a lot of tire degradation when he was on close to the end of his final stint in the inters when Hulkenberg had passed him, and then again on those softs. And we'll get into Lance and Aston Martin in a second. I just wanted to wrap up this thought on that, though, because it is important to note that Hulkenberg getting by Lance, getting the clean air, definitely helped him as well with his own tire degradation. And then when Lewis Hamilton pitted before Hulkenberg, the team wasn't really worried too much at all. What they wanted to do is hang the car out just for a little bit longer to see if the track could dry just that little bit more, so they could have their opportunity to box and get it back out in front on slick tires. And for Wheatley, he felt that switch, it wasn't to undercut anyone. It was essentially they were concerned about the timing of it. When were they going to pit? Were they going to pit and come back out when the track was still trying to dry, or were they going to be able to nail that window where the track was dry enough so Hulkenberg could go and push on the slick tires? Because if you notice towards the end of the race, when Lewis started to really make a push to try and get Nico, Hulkenberg was able to answer back, and that's because the way that they had pitted, he had brought the tires up to temperature, how he used the tire, and then executed on really using the tire when he had to, and that was to protect himself from Lewis Hamilton in this race. So very impressive performance from Nico Hulkenberg. And to tell you about the celebrations, I went down to Sauber to see all the celebrations. So they didn't have enough champagne. Sauber didn't have enough champagne. They only had 2 bottles. That's all they brought. So what they ended up doing is Mercedes and Aston Martin, they ended up being kind enough to give them all of their champagne. So I went down there and they got these champagne bottles. They started popping them, spraying it everywhere. We all got sprayed. It was pretty wild. Very exciting stuff. But what was funny was that when we went to sit down and speak with Jonathan Wheatley, the team principal of Sauber, and he sat down with us, he slapped this big cigar on the table that someone had given to him, and he's going to go smoke that later in celebration. So it was a wild scene down there. Pretty cool. Very happy for the team. They deserved it. Worked really hard. Hulkenberg drove one heck of a race. My third takeaway from all this, and it's kind of a double one, it's who impressed and who disappointed. I think when we take a look at what Aston Martin has done this weekend in terms of that impression, I would say Aston Martin impressed, and here's why. Bringing a new update to the car that actually worked. This is something that Aston Martin's been struggling with for a few years now. They bring an update and it doesn't work and the car goes in another direction, usually backwards. For them, made a really good floor for the car for this weekend, and you could see it with Lance in practice and then again with Fernando in qualifying on Saturday. Now for the race on Sunday, the team bringing Lance in and pitting him for that really quick soft tire stint was a stroke of genius. One, the driver had to make sure that he was going to be able to capitalize on the soft tire and get all the performance out of it. And 2, the team was pitting him at the right moment and avoiding the rain. And they did both of those things, and Lance executed perfectly in that moment. He set some really impressive lap times and chewed his way through the field, and that's how he was able to get up to P3. That part of his race was just so important. Now, the offset of having a new floor and not really understanding it 100% is how much are the tires going to deg with this new component. And what ended up happening was, with this new update, they still needed to refine it a little bit to find that perfect window where the tires aren't degging as much, because they had a lot of tire deg in this race. That's essentially what allowed Nico to get by, because Hulkenberg even said it to us in the press conference room that Lance was actually extremely fast. He actually just had better tire degradation than Lance did on the car, and that's essentially why Lance started to drop back. And then when they put the soft tires for that final stint for Lance on, again, that tire only lasted a few laps, and then it really degged on him, and he dropped back a bit. But I still thought that Aston Martin had a pretty good weekend here regardless. Getting good points for the team is crucial, especially right now when Sauber is doing so well at the same time. The team I would say disappointed, I would say Mercedes, disappointed in this weather, making the wrong strategy calls. I spoke with Toto Wolff following the race, and he had told us that essentially they made the wrong call when it came to the pit stop strategy and when they actually were pitting their drivers. He felt that they should have split the strategy, because he said that when he made that first initial pit stop, it was sort of a downward spiral for the team at that moment. And so essentially what you're doing is that Kimi Antonelli was in such a prime position that pitting him and not splitting his strategy like they should have done costed them a podium. That's what Toto Wolff thought. And I agree with him. I thought Antonelli, when they pitted him there, I thought that was a bit of a mistake, because essentially I think he could have been on for a podium. But what a great race. It was super awesome. I mean, to be here, to take it in, to watch it. The qualifying on Saturday was, I mean, incredible. It was, something to behold. If fans out there, if you ever get a chance, you want to come to British Grand Prix, you should. It's a lot of fun, trust me. We're going to have more Formula One action on TSN in the weeks ahead, so we'll talk to y'all later.